you decided to get a gun license in Oklahoma, in Tulsa specifically, and you wrote a story about it, about what you had to go through to get one.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, was there any particular reason you wanted to get a firearm at this point?
Not really. I'd always been sort of interested in it. My family was not against gun ownership, but my parents just didn't own a gun. It just wasn't, they just never saw the reason to have one, and I didn't have one in the house, but everyone I knew had one, and I grew up around hunters and sportsmen, and so I was familiar with them, but not enough to know to go out and know how to buy one, how to shoot one, or anything like that. And so with the open carry law coming up, we were talking in the newsroom about different stories that we could do, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to go out and actually experience what it would be like to go through and get a concealed carry license, which also in Oklahoma will allow you to open carry in November. And so it was just out of just curiosity and timing, and just kind of see what the experience is firsthand.
So the first thing you did, you took a safety training class.
Yes. Well, the first thing I did is I called up cold, and this was kind of, I found it more difficult to find where to go, because if you don't have any experience in sort of the areas of guns and weapons, how do you cold call someone to know what kind of safety training you're getting? So on a reference from a coworker of mine, I cold called a gun range, and when I told them what I was doing and I wanted to get into the concealed carry, they were the ones who suggested I get into the safety training first. After going through that, had I just gone into the concealed carry, I would have been a little lost. And so I'm glad that they were thinking of safety first and then concealed carry license. And so that's how the safety training came up first.
So you took a day off from work, day and a half actually off from work.
Yeah, it was a little longer than I thought it would be, so yes.
And you were lucky because your company paid for this, and we're talking about anything where $100 to $135. But I got to ask you, if you had to pay up front yourself, would that have affected, would you have changed your mind at all? Because a lot of people, for them, that's a heck of a lot of money.
It is. I mean, for just doing it as a hobby out of just, I don't want to do it. No, I think my family would have been like, we've got some other priorities first. But then I do know some people who have gone through that process because they had a stalker or they wanted protection or there was a reason, and so it became more of a priority for them. So, but it's a cost, because the class itself was about $100 to $135, depending on the class. But then the license is $100, and then another $25. So yes, I mean that's a significant investment just to get through the training and the concealed carry. So for me right now, no, and that may have been why I never really did it before, was because it wasn't a priority for me in my own household budget. So no, I probably wouldn't have.
But it's great you did it, and you've never shot a gun before, so there you are showing up at the range.
Exactly. It was fun. It was fun. I can see the kind of excitement. It reminds me a lot of golf on the range, where you're trying to best yourself and you're trying to get the right stance, and you can try out different weapons, because they were making fun of me because I shot a .22 Ruger, and some of the guys here thought, well, that's just not a real gun. But I said it was hard enough. I can't imagine doing something bigger. But I can see where for sport it's pretty fun. But it's also kind of daunting. You're holding a weapon that can kill someone. So that's why I was a little shaky at first. I thought, wow, this is really kind of a heady experience. But it was a lot harder than I thought. And I don't know if that came across in my column, but it's very, very difficult to shoot on target. And I was thinking later, I was in the best possible situation on a range where I'm calm, we have great lighting, and it was still hard. So, I mean, I could see where practice and safety and those kind of things really come into play.
And that's what the NRA stresses.
Exactly. And I said that's where I think the NRA does a good job, because they do encourage those things. And I know that the gun range I was at encourages those very same things. They throw in a year's membership to try to encourage people to come back to do that very same thing, which is to stay in practice and to keep your skill up, which is a good thing. And if we're going to carry for protection, then we should really be able to have that skill to protect ourselves.
But it looks like you did pretty good, because you got the target sitting there on your desk.
Well, it's interesting. I went with another reporter who had actually grown up hunting and shooting rifles. And when it came to handguns, he had a certain hold and a certain stand, and he wasn't hitting very well. But having gone through the safety training and learning a different way of holding the gun, he started then hitting a little more accurately. So even I kind of saw where a person who's very familiar with guns and considered himself very proficient really wasn't doing very well until he went and got some sort of formal training and thought, oh, he kind of clicked with him that that he could do something a little better with with a professional session.
So overall, what'd you think of the process, start to finish?
The actual filling out the paperwork and that, well, it was cumbersome. It wasn't really that hard, but it is an investment for the time to get to that point. You have to sit through 6 to 8 hours of training, and some of that can be boring. Some of it can be helpful. And it does vary from instructor to instructor, as I'm sort of finding out. I had a great experience with mine. Other people didn't have such a great experience because the instructor may have, like, I think of my column, kind of gets off on politics and things that maybe make people uncomfortable. Because this is strictly just about getting the license. And clearly, if you're getting a license, you're all sort of the same mind.
You should be glad you're there in Tulsa, because I was mentioning to you, Emily Miller here, who writes for the Washington Times, she wrote a whole series on this, and she really exposed the system here for what it is, all sorts of hurdles, one thing after another. And she thought it was going to take a few weeks at it, and it ended up taking, a couple of months for her. But she really explained what it's like. There isn't even a gun shop here in D.C. to buy a firearm. There isn't a rate.
We have plenty of that here.
Yeah, so that's you're very lucky. You're living there in Tulsa.
Yeah, we have, and maybe that's the difference. I come from a culture where we have plenty of gun ranges and instructors, and that sort of made me an oddity. A lot of people assumed, because I'd never fired a gun, because I didn't own a weapon, that I would be anti-gun or be against the Second Amendment, and that just wasn't true at all. It was just, like I say, I had family members, friends. I think every guy I dated had a gun, but it just wasn't a priority in my family, so it was just never taught to me. And so I just looked at this as an opportunity. And so I was always interested, but just never had a reason or an opportunity to get that. But certainly I think, in Oklahoma, while, we're very much in support of the Second Amendment, and we certainly are having an open carry come on, there is a little bit of a cost, because only 3% of Oklahomans have a concealed carry. Yep. So while we have thousands and thousands of gun owners, not very many go through those hurdles. Now, whether that's the cost or whether that's the paperwork, I'm not sure. I didn't find the paperwork to be that burdensome, but like I say, I think the cost would probably be more of an issue than the paperwork. But there's also a backlog right now, and I should mention that, and we've written about that before. It is supposed to take 1 to 3 months, but in some cases I think it's taking more like 5 months because of just the sheer backlog of people wanting to get the license.
That's good news. And we've been reporting on that too. There's been a huge increase across the country on this. But I got to ask you, you've been through it, so do you plan to get a firearm now?
Well, it's expensive. That's why I said it's, right now I have 2 small children, and I don't feel where I'm at a skill level to where I could have one in the house. But that's not to say that I won't be out of the range with the rental program that the gun range has. I have an uncle that is talking to me about a possible Christmas gift for a gun. But,
oh, wow.
So, I'm not saying never, but I'd kind of like to get a little bit more experience and a little bit more knowledge before I really brought one in the house, and to know how to put the safeties on and know how to really work it well. But I can definitely see it being an addictive sport, because it was fun. I mean, I said it was a lot more fun than I thought it was. It was a lot more difficult than I thought it was. So no, I could definitely see myself getting one, but I'm just not sure I'm at the level I need to be at yet.